Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. It is the most earth-breaking, ground-shaking, but never media shell money-taking, the man, the myth, the legend, the most electrified villain in all of YouTube entertainment today, General Zod, to bring you a review. I'm sorry, I've been a little behind on these reviews. I've had a lot of stuff going on. I'm currently working on a novel right now, so if my videos uploading schedule is a little sporadic, that is why. But let me talk about a movie that I actually saw with my mother. Yes, Mother Zod, which I gotta say, kind of really changes some of my views when you're watching a movie, especially when you go with a family member or something like that, which I'll get to that portion of my review. But this is for the new follow up to Nobody. Now, if you guys have been following my channel, you know I am a huge John Wick fan. John Wick, to me, is one of the greatest movie franchises of the 2000s. And I say that because people are going to say, oh, what about Rambo and Die Hard? I mean, I was born in '84, but I'm a '90s kid. Most of the action franchises I remember are from the '90s. So I have a lot of nostalgia for those action type films. But for me, John Wick is one of the most, just the story behind it. And I'm going to have a video up on Wick is Pain, which is a great documentary that might make my top movies of this year. Not horror movies, folks, my top 10, because I got a top 10 movie list, top 10 horror movie list, and then top 10 shows of the year, and also the top 10 worst movies of this year, which, boy, that list is going to be interesting. But no, I want to talk about this with John Wick because Nobody, to me, was a very interesting movie. Now, if you guys don't know the history behind it, Bob Odenkirk has been around for a long time. He's been one of my favorite, not only comedy, but dramatic actors. He's done shows like Better Call Saul, which I consider one of the greatest shows of all time, along with Breaking Bad. And he was also in Fargo in season one. And some people know him back in the day from sketch comedy. So, Bob Odenkirk has a very particular look about him. And so, as you could tell, like, see by this poster here, Bob Odenkirk, his look reminds me a lot of the everyday guy. And so putting him in an action movie even feels more like fitting than John Wick because Keanu Reeves has always had a cool, he's got this thing about him, this mystique where I could buy him in these action movies. But Bob Odenkirk has a particular look that back in the day before, and people forget Liam Neeson started this trend with Taken, but the old guy action hero, right? The guy who comes into a town, doesn't look like much, and then he fucks all these people up. Now, what Nobody One, I think, did that made it one of my favorite movies the year that it came out was that it not only showed Bob Odenkirk as having action chops injected with a little bit of dark humor, but also the scenes I loved the most from the movie was his day in and day out life, the feeling of feeling mundane. You have a particular skill set, but you're kind of wasted. You're in this job that's a nice, safe job. You got a nice, safe wife. There's hints that the wife used to do things back in the day, and that's how they met, but nothing's ever expanded on. And so when you get to the final balls out crazy ending that nobody has, it's like this slow buildup. So Nobody Two was in an interesting position because much like John Wick, it goes one of two ways. Either you expand on the character or you expand on the world. But Nobody doesn't really have a world. Spoilers for the first one if you haven't seen it while you're watching my review on the second one. But basically, he was a CIA assassin, or it's hinted towards maybe an agency within the CIA. It's all very vague. So obviously, the world building wasn't going to be there. So with the second movie, then you have to go a different route, which is your Rambo's or, maybe the John McClane, right? You go and build on the character itself. Nobody Two is very interesting, and I'll get into more of this in a bit because it kind of does both, but doesn't hard commit to either. So Nobody 2 is starring Bob Odenkirk, Connie Nielsen, the RZA, who is great, Colin Solomon, Gage Monroe, Presley Cordeff, Christopher Lloyd, John Ortiz, Colin Hanks, and I'm not going to ruin who the big baddie is because that's, I think, supposed to be a surprise reveal. However, if you've been on the internet, you know who it is, but you guys will know when you know. Even Mother Zod was surprised because it's a very old school actress. Um, and it is the story of Hutch Manzini, who, due to the events of the first film, he owes this clandestine agency a shit ton of money because he burned the Russian money. So he agrees to go back to work for them. His wife, now knowing what he does vaguely, I think, because it was implied at the end of the movie, he was going to sit down and talk to her about everything, which kind of feeds into something later that I'll get into. But uh, he's doing the mundane scene, but this time it's a mundane scene of him going and doing his thing and then coming home. He's not with his wife, cooking breakfast, that whole scene returns. And so he finally decides that in order to get back a connection with his family, he is going to take them to this place he used to go to as a kid, this fun little amusement theme park thing, and him and his family are going to go on vacation. And so they go back to this small little town that he used to go to called Plummerville, where him and his dad, and I guess RZA is his brother now, confirmed, which is answers opens up a whole sort of other bunch of questions. But they're going to go to Plummerville to go to this amusement park that they like. And of course, as things do, trouble follows Hutch, and there is more to the town of Plummerville than meets the eye. So let me start out with the obvious. This is going to be compared a lot to Nobody One. And I think that for this movie, this feels like a franchise that's going to fall into the area of not being able to compare the movies to each other because tonally and stylistically, this is a very different movie, which is interesting because it has the same director, who is Timo to Tojahate, who is an Indonesian film director. So the tones of these movies are very different and intentionally so. I've seen some interviews, you can go check them out, with Bob Odenkirk, and they wanted to have a much more colorful feel, as the last one was kind of him dealing with this darkness, hiding who he is, hiding in the shadows, and this more is a fucked up version of Family Vacation. If you guys have ever seen the National Lampoon's Family Vacation, but with violence, is what this reminds me of. So let me get into my good, my bad, and what I think. I think this movie is a movie that I can watch consecutively and might change my minds on repeat viewings on what I like and don't like. But one thing that won't change is I like the first set of villains that are introduced and the feel in the beginning versus the main antagonists we get at the end, which I thought wasn't bad by the person doing the main villain. I just think their tone was far removed for what the movie was establishing in the beginning. Also, too, I think Bob Odenkirk's performance as Hutch is great as always, as this guy who just wants to go on vacation with his family, trying to de-escalate the situation. And there's one scene in particular, you'll know when you see it, where he has a chance to let things go. And I think that they do good character insight with that, because despite him having the clear window to be able to get the fuck out and let things run as they may, you start to kind of see he doesn't. There's also a theme of generational violence, which I really feel the movie misses the opportunity to explore this theme between Hutch and his son. Obviously, Hutch and I think even his wife have a sort of very dark, violent past that's alluded to a lot between the first movie and this one, and I feel like they just don't tap into that as much as I'd like. Now, another one of my favorite movies, and I may do a review of it on this channel, is a movie called A History of Violence, which is one of my all-time favorite movies that explore generational violence. And in that movie, you have Viggo Mortensen, who portrays this normal guy who runs a cafe. People go to rob him. He deals with them. And then these mobsters who had been looking for him for years wind up finding him because he's this big local town hero and on the news. And you see it really dives into, does the violence and things that you hold back, does that pass on to your children? Is it nature versus nurture? Is it genetics? Is it just that those things are already there, but how the parents choose to raise their kids determines which way they're going to go? All of those fun questions. Now, nobody kind of explores this, but then drops it very early in the movie, where I think there was a lot of different opportunities because they really lean hard into Hutch's son kind of just acting off of a limb, knowing what his father does, and kind of being like, hey, why is it okay for dad to beat the shit out of like 10 people, but I can't? And I thought that was very interesting. And then they just kind of dropped that. And so there's also some interesting subplots that, like about his wife, that we get little teases, but then they kind of just like, oh, they give us a little bit more breadcrumbs. So I'm hoping there'll be a Nobody 3 and they really get more into their backstories. As far as what the highlight of this movie is, this is a pure, like, if you're a fan of action movies, this is like a pure action fan movie stuff. And I think this has been the big takeaway from a lot of reviews. I'm going to be no different. The fucking action, this is fantastic. There is tons of set pieces. Me and my mom had a wonderful time with. There was some shit where my mom was like, damn, like, oh, like, there's a particular scene where it kind of turns into an R-rated style Home Alone, which remind me of Becky, which is, if you haven't seen that movie, I might do a review of that too. But basically, it's like if Home Alone was a little girl instead of uh, McAllister, and if she killed people and the people chasing Kevin were fucking Nazis. That's a wild movie too. But nobody gave me those vibes at a certain scene. You'll know when you see it. Also, some of the like smaller little skirmishes were very inventive. Some of them had a laugh in my theater. Particular scene with whack-a-mole was hilarious. But for me, I think, and I noticed with a lot of other reviews too, which I put this out before I checked the reviews, or I recorded this before that, but I do feel a sense like Nobody had its own kind of tone. And in this one, it went a little bit too comedic, which still Bob Odenkirk does a great job because he plays Hutch very similar to the first time, but with a little bit more of a dry delivery on the zinger. So I don't feel his character changed. It's just the situation is slightly more wacky instead of grounded. And depending on how you feel is going to depend on whether you like this movie. But with that being said, what are my negatives? And my biggest negative is tone. The tone is, I like the first movie's tone a lot more over this one. However, I do like the fact that, being this is shot in the day, the fight scenes are super good, super clean. I thought the choreograph was really good in this movie. There's no quick cuts, no cutaways. You see bones break. You see people get messed up with like those fish hook things and a ton of shit. Just crazy. Dude gets beat with a whack-a-mole, the little mallet thing that you use to whack the molds gets used in a very creative way. So that's all good, but my main negative is the tonal shift and is the main villain. I think are the weakest parts of this movie. I do like the interaction that the wife gets in the movie, and we get to see why she would fall for Hutch, because she herself is a fucking badass. And even leading to this scene, they do give you clues, going all the way back to the first movie. But it was fun to see what that arc was all about. And I love the Reza scene, even though it's fucking super ridiculous. you'll know when you see it. Like RZA's scene is so like if you guys came from the Wu-Tang era, this guy right here, this is like everything RZA ever dreamed of, like with samurais and shit, and I'll leave it at that. But all in all, I gotta say, I was very disappointed with Superman, which is going to be probably my hottest take of this year. I fucking hated Jurassic Park. But with Nobody 2, I was just disappointed at aspects, but me and my mom came out loving this movie. And I had a lot of fun, and I'm probably going to own this movie and watch it a couple more times, maybe later to see when I separated myself more from the first movie to see how they stack up. I definitely think the first movie is better because it was kind of a shock to see Bob Odenkirk being able to do all of this stuff. But at the end of the day, this movie is just fun. It's a fucking fun movie. This movie is more to me than when some ridiculous person says Jurassic Park Afterbirth is well, it's just a popcorn flick. It's a dinosaur movie. They're all stupid. No, this is stupid fun to me. Like movies like this that still have good characters, good acting. Like the acting in this isn't poor. It's just stuff you've seen before. Except for the main villain. She goes kind of overboard. You'll know when you know. But the rest of the actors, like, they still are engaging. They're fun. Colin Hanks is great in this. It's actually very interesting to see him in this kind of role. I did see him in Dexter season 6, but this was more of a realistic villain as opposed to that fucking god awful season of Dexter. Um, and it was fun seeing him in this role. Even the kind of themes of fathers and their sons was a good little theme in here. So, all in all, I honestly am gonna give this movie an 8 out of 10 because I've given Superman a 7, and I think I like this one more than Superman. So I got to go higher and give this movie an 8. I would be at a 9 or 10 if it gave me the vibes of the first one, but I definitely a solid 8, and I would suggest seeing it in the theater because in IMAX it was fucking fantastic. But anyways, yeah, I love this movie. I think it's great, and I'll be honest with you, not as exciting as getting, say, another John Wick, but this is a nice little franchise, and I think it could be fun. And I think, as long as Bob is older, he has had a couple of health scares, but I'd be down for maybe doing this as a trilogy and capping it off with a third, just fucking balls out crazy movie. But anyways, in the comments below, let me know. Did you like Nobody 2? Have you ever seen it? Or what is your favorite action flick of all time? As I said, it's really tough, and people are probably going to hold me to the coals, but I'd say John Wick is my favorite action franchise of all time, just because of watching the documentary, which I'll explain and maybe do a retrospective on every movie. But no other franchise that's kind of like my Rambo, my Die Hard and things like that. Like I love those movies, but something about John Wick really got me. And I remember the theater experience when I first went to see that. But what's your favorite action movie? Are you a big fan of Nobody? Have you seen this? Are you planning on seeing this? Or what is the most recent action movie you've seen that you've really enjoyed? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, remember, there is only one rule here in the Fandom Zone: kneel before General Zod.